Hello and welcome to the Correspondents on Voice of America. I'm Arcega in Washington. Well, the process of evacuating traumatized and wounded civilians started this week in the Syrian city of Aleppo. Convoys of buses and ambulances were seen busing people out of the eastern section of that city on Thursday, marking the start of the long-awaited pullout from the last rebel enclave in that embattled Syrian city. Now, a long convoy of green buses can be seen here driving through government territory into a rural, safe, rebel-held part of Aleppo province. The evacuation was part of the ceasefire deal reached this week for the rebels to surrender or face more devastating ground and air attacks by government forces. Since then, a number of stoppages have raised new questions about whether those evacuations can continue. And to tell us more about the continuing plight of civilians in Aleppo, I'm joined from our New York studio by our UN correspondent, Margaret Besheer. Hi, Margaret. And
good morning.
And via Skype from Annapolis, Maryland, international correspondent Jamie Dettmer. Jamie has been covering Syria extensively from the region, so I'm glad to have both of you on the program. Thank you so much. Margaret, I'm going to start with you. Evacuations, as you know, have been on and off for much of this week. They were suspended again Friday morning as we go to air. What was the reason this time? Have there been any new reports?
Well, I did see a tweet on social media from a spokesperson from the ICRC saying they had been suspended, that they'd gotten about 8,000 people out. It's unclear. One of the reports I saw said that there was some sort of deal where there should have been evacuations from Fua and Kafraya, which is another town, two towns. So there's some question of what's going on and which side is preventing it, the government or the rebels.
Yeah, Margaret, there have been a number of reports this week of widespread atrocities that were committed by forces loyal to the regime, including, we're hearing, summary executions of entire families. What do you know about that? What can you tell us?
Look, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Zeid al-Hussein, he has made some strong statements this week. We've heard from ambassadors as well at the United Nations. There are a lot of reports of people being executed in hospitals, in the street, women and children summarily gunned down. Mm-hmm. The thing is, the UN isn't on the ground in these places and cannot really verify the reports, but the High Commissioner is saying that they're credible enough that he's repeating them. So, information on the ground is sketchy, and that's one of the reasons the UN has been repeatedly insisting that it needs to have aid workers, monitors on the ground monitoring this evacuation process.
Right. Okay. Jamie, I want to get you into this conversation. You were at the Syrian border, I understand, just last month. Did you manage to talk to any of the civilians there about conditions in Aleppo?
Sure. I mean, I've been covering the war for the last 5 years, and I've been in constant touch. I've been inside Aleppo myself for about a year ago when it became really too dangerous for journalists. Yes, I've been talking to people regularly. I'm talking to people this morning who are still in Aleppo by Skype, by tweeting as well. It's very difficult. There are only 93% of eastern Aleppo does not have any internet, and so they're relying mainly on cell phones. The conditions have been utterly appalling and particularly bad the last month. You have to remember that this offensive isn't just really the last month. It began in earnest nearly a year ago in February, when the Russians backed an offensive which swung north of Aleppo, trying to encircle it, which they basically managed to do in about March, April. Very little food, no medical aid really inside now at all. There are one or two clinics that were kind of functioning, but as you know, the hospitals have been bombed as well the last few weeks and the last few months. People are just getting by. You have to picture it really like what happened in Chechnya when the Russians put down an uprising there at Grozny. People are starving.
Jamie, do any of these complaints rise to the level of human rights violations?
Oh, of course they do.
Yeah, they do.
I think what we're seeing now is what we saw really at the beginning of this uprising, when the Assad regime reacted very aggressively, aggressive is understatement, to the popular protests. for the regime to go, where you are seeing tremendous atrocities. You're seeing people being, families being murdered. You're seeing summary executions. You're seeing detentions without due process. You're seeing torture. Yes, of course.
Right.
I don't know the scale of it inside right at the moment in eastern Aleppo. I'm not there. My contacts are telling me at least 100 people have been summarily executed. I can't verify that independently. Right. But as Margaret pointed out, the UN being allowed in.
It's a desperate situation for a lot of people there. But, you know, Margaret and Jamie, much of the UN criticism about the deteriorating conditions for civilians there has been leveled at Russia, as you know, for its ongoing military support of the government of Bashar al-Assad. U.S. ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, had some very strong words for Moscow at an emergency session this week. I think we have the tape, so let's have a listen, and I'll ask both of you for your comments.
It is your noose. 3 member states of the UN contributing to a noose around civilians. It should shame you. Instead, by all appearances, it is emboldening you. You are plotting your next assault. Are you truly incapable of shame? Is there literally nothing that can shame you?
Now, Margaret, aside from shaming the Russians and the Syrian regime, is there anything else the UN can do to stop these atrocities? Is there any action planned there at the UN?
Well, look, countries are like the United States, France, Britain are trying to use public pressure, moral pressure, shaming the Russians into changing course in Syria, which I think is going to be a very difficult goal to accomplish because the regime that they're propping up is succeeding on the ground militarily right now. Today in the UN Security Council, there are going to be emergency consultations in about 2 hours. The French have asked for those. France and Germany are discussing proposals to have international monitors monitor the evacuations and delivery of aid to people in eastern Aleppo. So they're going to discuss that proposal today in the council, I understand. But there's, you know, there's this feeling that, look, the UN Security Council's mandate, its purpose, is to maintain international peace and security. And Russia has used its veto 6 times now in nearly 6 years to block efforts that could restore stability and peace to Syria. And countries are outraged. And in the General Assembly just a week ago, there was a vote on a resolution where I think it was 122 countries supported getting aid in and the sick and the wounded out of eastern Aleppo, and only 13 countries objected. So that was Russia and basically 12 of the world's, you know, pretty shadiest countries.
Right.
Excuse me.
Jamie, we're sort of running short on time here, but with most of Aleppo now under government control, do you see this as the end of the government opposition groups? What happens to them now?
No, I don't see this as an end, and we've got a bigger tragedy going to unfold actually west of Aleppo. What we're really seeing are the Russians and the Iranians and the Syrian regime pushing the rebels into one area, a province called Idlib. It's what in technical military terms, strategic terms, would be a kill box. Gather all your enemies, all your opponents in one place, and then go for them completely, try to destroy them completely. Idlib is the one large piece of territorial hold that the rebels have. It will take weeks, I think even months to subdue it, but I think that's where the fighting shifts to. You've got a lot of civilians in there as well. A lot of civilians who've left Aleppo have gone there. Of course, the Turks will not open the border at the moment to new refugees. So we are looking at a terrible tragedy down the line as well with Idlib. The rebellion, I've talked to a lot of Syrian rebel leaders, commanders, politicians the last few weeks, few months. They insist that even if they lose Aleppo, even if they lose Idlib, the war will continue. But I think it will continue very much on a guerrilla, using guerrilla strategy. They won't be holding territory. But you can't really stop this in these circumstances. A lot of people...
I'm sure we've not heard the end of this, Jamie, but I'm out of time. So I'd like to thank you and Margaret Besheer. It's time to take a quick break right now. But when we come back, the president-elect names his new Secretary of State. What we know about that nominee and what his selection might mean for American diplomacy. This is The Correspondents on Voice of America.
From science and technology, here's what's new.
Scientists in Switzerland have successfully restored movement in paralyzed monkeys. With spinal cord injuries, brain signals don't reach the nerves that activate movement, but the Swiss researchers have found a way to bypass spinal injury. Jocelyn Bloch is with the Lausanne University Hospital.
For the first time, I can imagine a patient, completely pelagic, being able to obey to his brain commands through this brain-spinal interface.
Yes, and for that to happen, a wireless sensor is implanted in the brain and a nerve stimulator is implanted near the spinal injury. The sensor picks up brain signals commanding leg movement and transmits them to a computer. The computer decodes the signals and sends them to the implant at the spine. This in turn triggers muscles in the leg, enabling it to move and flex. Results indicated some of the monkeys were able to walk immediately after activation of the two implants. For VOA's What's New, I'm Todd Groshans.